"Excuse me, I believe my table is waiting." That's all she said. No drama, no raised voice, just a quiet sentence, spoken with the kind of calm that makes you stop and wonder. The restaurant had gone quiet, not because of noise, but because of stillness. And in that stillness stood a woman in her 80s, wearing a navy wool coat, white gloves, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. No one knew who she was, but in just under an hour, everyone in that room would. Some would shift in shame, others would stand up for the first time in their lives, and one man, who had built everything from nothing, would be forced to confront the truth in front of everyone. Not with anger, but with justice. This is the story of Mildred Carter, and the night her silence turned a fine dining room upside down. Thank you for being here. Sometimes, the smallest moments carry the greatest meaning. Today's story is one of those. Quiet, powerful, and worth remembering. If it touches your heart, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like more stories like this, you're warmly invited to subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss the next one. Now, let's take a closer look at what really happened. The sun hung low over the Franklin district, casting long amber shadows across the sidewalk. Inside Carter's table, one of Portland's most exclusive restaurants, the evening had just begun. The clink of crystal, the murmur of tailored conversations, and the smooth notes of a jazz trio drifting softly from the corner stage. It was the kind of place where fortunes were toasted and power quietly exchanged over seared halibut and vintage Bordeaux. Everything gleamed. Polished glass, silver forks, hand-stitched menace. Every detail whispered you've arrived. Then the front door opened, and for just a breath, the hum of the room shifted. An elderly black woman stood beneath the entry chandelier. Her posture was elegant, straight, backed, despite her years. She wore a navy coat with embroidered cuffs, white gloves, and sensible shoes that made no sound on the marble tile. A black leather handbag rested in the crook of her elbow. Some diners glanced up, then quickly returned to their wine. She didn't look like a regular. She didn't look like she belonged. The hostess stepped forward, greeting her with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Do you have a reservation, ma'am?" A subtle emphasis on you. The woman didn't flinch. "Yes," under Carter. Mildred Carter, her voice was even, with just enough weight to cut through the air like a cello note. The hostess checked the list, hesitated, then nodded. "Right this way." Instead of leading her to one of the window seats, where other patrons sat beneath soft light and rose arrangements, she gestured toward a small table in the back, beside the kitchen door, one of the few places where the scent of truffle oil was often overpowered by dishwater. Mrs. Carter didn't protest. She simply sat, folded her gloves in her lap, and waited. It took 10 minutes before anyone came by. The waiter, young, fit, smiling from ear to ear at every other table, brushed past her twice without so much as a glance. Finally, he stopped. No warmth in his eyes. No name given. "Sorry for the wait. We're a little backed up. I'll be back to take your order in a bit." Then gone again. Across the room, seated near the bar, a man in his 30s watched the exchange from behind a tumbler of water. He wore a crisp navy suit and an expression so still it almost looked bored, but his fingers tapped slowly on the mahogany table. He hadn't touched his drink. He hadn't blinked much either. His name was Elijah Carter, and the woman being dismissed as an afterthought was his mother. Time passed, not fast. Not slow, just long enough to make silence feel awkward. Mrs. Carter sat with the menu still untouched. No water, no bread, not even a glance from the server who floated effortlessly between other tables. Charming a birthday party, laughing with a tech executive, joking with the sommelier. He had a name, Tyler, but he hadn't offered it to her. Not once. Every time he passed her table, it was like she was invisible. And if he did look in her direction, it was with the tightness of someone trying not to sigh. Across the room, diners were beginning to notice. A couple near the windows whispered. "Has anyone even helped her yet?" The woman asked softly. Her husband shrugged, unsure, but his eyes lingered on Tyler's easy smile at every other table but that one. From his seat near the bar, Elijah Carter didn't move, didn't interfere, didn't even sip his drink. But inside, his chest burned. He'd built this place, from a rundown storefront to one of the top fine dining experiences on the West Coast. He had designed every square inch, trained every staff member, preached about standards, service, decency. And now here he sat, watching his own employee treat his mother like an afterthought, like someone who didn't belong here, didn't deserve eye contact, didn't even qualify for water. Back at her table, Mrs. Carter remained still. She hadn't pulled out her phone, hadn't asked to speak to anyone, hadn't stood up or called out. But her presence was louder than any of that. There was a poise to her, a stillness that said, "I've seen worse than this. I've survived worse than you." She folded her hands over one another, looked once at her empty glass, and waited. Tyler passed again. This time, he stopped, only because it was too obvious to ignore. Still deciding, he asked, tone sharp. Mrs. Carter looked up and smiled, a real smile. "I'm ready whenever you are, young man." Her words weren't bitter. They weren't sarcastic. But they hit Tyler like a slap, because there was something else behind them, something that made his skin itch. He mumbled something and walked away again. No pad. No order. At the bar, Elijah leaned back, his hand curled into a fist. He had waited long enough. He turned to the general manager, Angela, a woman in her 50s with years of experience etched into every corner of her calm face. "Keep an eye on table 11, he said softly, not taking his eyes off his mother. "Do not intervene." "Not yet." Angela followed his gaze, her breath caught when she recognized the guest. She nodded. The room was shifting now. It wasn't loud, but it was watching. Eyes flicked toward the corner table more often. The tension that once belonged to one woman was now spreading. Still, Tyler seemed oblivious. Or worse, he didn't care. He delivered dessert to a couple that had arrived 20 minutes after Mrs. Carter. He refilled wine glasses, but left hers dry. He even gave a half smirk to another server who glanced at her table and raised an eyebrow. It was the smirk that broke Elijah's patience. Mrs. Carter finally raised her hand. Not high, not rushed, just a soft gesture the kind people used when they were still giving someone a chance. "Excuse me," she said, voice gentle, cutting cleanly through the murmurs and silverware. Tyler turned, half expecting a complaint. His face tightened before he even reached her. "Yes." No warmth, no courtesy. "I'd like to place my order," she said. "If you're not too busy." The words were velvet, but they landed like iron. Tyler sighed, audibly, glanced around as if checking for backup, and muttered, "I'll be back in a minute." He didn't come back. Across the room, Elijah stood. He didn't slam his chair, didn't raise his voice. But the moment he moved, the room froze. The pianist's fingers lifted from the keys. Forks stopped midair. Even the manager, Angela, took a step forward, then stopped herself. Elijah crossed the floor like someone who wasn't in a rush, but wasn't going to stop, either. He reached Tyler just as the waiter was laughing with another table. "Tyler," he said, calm and direct. The smile on Tyler's face broke like glass. "Elijah, hey. I didn't know you were." "I've been here," Elijah said, voice low and even. "And I've been watching." Tyler blinked, unsure where to look. "Watching what?" Elijah pointed, not with a finger but with his eyes, to the woman sitting at table 11. "The one you've ignored for over 30 minutes. Tyler's eyes darted toward Mrs. Carter, then back to Elijah. "Wait, her?" Elijah nodded once. "My mother." The entire restaurant went still. No one whispered. No one moved. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Elijah's tone didn't rise, but it didn't need to. "The woman you've brushed past. Dismissed. Treated like she didn't matter." Tyler opened his mouth to speak. Elijah raised a hand. "Don't." One word, flat. "Final. You had a chance to treat her like every other guest in this room. And you failed." Elijah turned slightly. "Angela," he said over his shoulder, "please take over table 11. Make sure my mother gets everything she needs. And do it now." Angela was already moving before he finished. Tyler stood frozen. Elijah turned back to him. The smile was gone from both of their faces. "You can go home now." Tyler's jaw twitched. "Elijah, you're done for the day. We'll talk later." "Not here. Not now." For a moment, Tyler didn't move. Then, in silence, he untied his apron, set it on a side table, and walked out. The door shut behind him with a heavy thud that felt louder than any slammed plate. Angela was already at Mrs. Carter's side, apologizing, pouring water, setting down a menu with both hands like it was sacred. Elijah stepped in quietly beside her. "Mom," he said softly, crouching beside her chair. She looked up and smiled gently. "I'm fine, son. I should have stepped in sooner," he whispered. "No," she said. "You let him reveal who he was. That's more powerful than stopping him too early." Elijah's eyes burned. Not with shame, but with understanding. She didn't need justice to be loud. She just needed it to be seen. The restaurant didn't bounce back right away. People resumed eating, yes, but slower. More careful. As if tasting not just food, but what had just happened. Conversations picked up again, but the laughter was quieter. The glances toward Mrs. Carter weren't the same anymore. Now they held something else. Respect. Remorse. Reflection. Angela stood at the service station, watching her team with new eyes. She gathered the servers after the last table had cleared. No reprimands. No shouting. Just a simple truth. What happened tonight? That's a mirror. Not just for Tyler, for all of us. The team nodded. Some ashamed, some thoughtful, all changed. Back at her table, Mrs. Carter finished her meal in peace. No performance. No grand speeches. Just quiet dignity. The kind that doesn't need a spotlight because it creates one. Elijah sat beside her, his hand resting lightly on the table, inches from hers. "You've built something beautiful here," she said softly, her voice warm. Elijah looked around the room. "I wanted it to feel like home. For everyone," she smiled. "Then make sure everyone is treated like they belong here. Not just the ones who look like they do." He nodded slowly. That was the lesson. Not just for tonight, but for every night to come. As she stood to leave, Elijah walked her to the door. The wind had picked up. The sky had turned indigo. For a moment, she paused beneath the archway. The restaurant behind her glowed golden in the dark. "You did good, son," she said. Elijah nodded, eyes glassy but proud. She stepped into the night. Inside, the staff worked in near silence. No one needed to be told what tonight meant. Every plate they polished, at every table they reset, it was a quiet vow. And to you, watching, listening, remembering, ask yourself this: if you'd been there that night, would you have said something? Would you have stood up? Or would you have watched and waited and let it happen? These moments don't always announce themselves, but they are everywhere. Let this story remind us all. Dignity isn't earned by appearance, it's owed to everyone, every guest, every voice, every soul who walks through the door. Choose empathy, choose to speak, choose to see. Sometimes injustice doesn't scream. It whispers through who gets ignored, who's made to wait, who doesn't get a second glance. And sometimes, those moments pass unnoticed. But not tonight. Tonight, someone saw, and that changed everything. Mrs. Carter didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Because strength isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's just a quiet woman sitting in the wrong seat for the right reason. And Elijah, he didn't just own a restaurant. He owned his values. When the moment came, he didn't blink. He stood. That's what leadership looks like. And for everyone watching, the real question is, if you'd been there, would you have stood too? Because these moments, they don't just happen in restaurants. They happen in life. In lobbies, on sidewalks, in boardrooms. When nobody thinks anyone's watching. So the next time you see something wrong, something quiet but cruel, remember what happened here and choose to speak with dignity, with grace, with courage. Thank you for being here. Sometimes the smallest moments carry the greatest meaning. This was one of those. Quiet, powerful, and worth remembering. If it touched your heart, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like more stories like this, you're warmly invited to subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss the next one. We'll see you soon. Until then, choose empathy.